Hey everyone, Tim here for the TFT Patch 17.7 rundown. This is going to be a pretty short one, it's not a large patch. Alright, patch goals. This is going to be the post-tack round patch. I'm filming this before tack round, so I didn't get the script, I don't know who's won, but I'm sure it was a really fun tournament, and congratulations to whoever won tack round. But as with every tack round patch, post-tack round patch, we're going to be buff heavy. We're going to focus on champions and content that's never quite hit and never gotten the time to shine. And there's also a bunch of 5-cost changes, right? Because I think our 5-cost philosophy changed a lot with set 16 and set 17. Set 16 naturally had the expanded roster and unlocks, so we got to do a lot of cool things there with threats. Extended that to set 17, and that did some good things. There's a lot of cool flexible things you can do with a lot of comps. A lot of the 5-costs, they flexed in and out a lot, but that also took a big hit to some of their fantasies, some of the trait webs, where it kind of felt like, oh, endgame, I can only play this 5-cost soup thing. So there's going to be some pretty big changes there. But jumping right into it, into traits, Anima Squad 6. You've heard me talk about this for multiple patches now. I think it's one of the biggest misses in the entire set. I always talk about this balance between risk, reward, and rarity. Anima Squad is a pretty big risk. It's pretty rare, and the reward is not exciting enough for players. Also, to make it even worse, it's in the Star Atlas, so people really want to finish that. And they just can't get it every game. They can't chase it every game, and when they do get it, it's still really, really coin flippy and hard to succeed with. So we're taking a pretty big swing here with the final few patches. Is we're making Anima Squad 6, Anima Squad 5. And so this does a lot of different things for Anima Squad. One, it means that if you're just playing Anima Squad 3, transitioning into 5 is pretty easy, and you can push your lead even farther. But two, it does a lot of good things for the emblem, right? The emblem actually means you can access the breakpoint a lot sooner. It feels a lot more valuable rather than sitting on 4 or 5 Anima Squad the whole game. It also means you can play this without the emblem. So that means people who are chasing the Star Atlas or just really want to play Anima 5 every game can do it. Naturally, this means we do have to nerf it. These are just small nerfs to the gold. I think it's going to be really, really strong, really powerful, but I think its time has finally come that it needs to do this. The other two trait changes are Replicator and Rogue. These are just two vertical classes that have never really felt consistently worth chasing or doing. For Replicator, has a lot of cool options, right? But it has a lot of low-cost units, so it needs to actually be worth it. Then Rogue, I think this was good very, very early in the set, but as we've evolved, as people have gotten better at the set, it's become not as valuable. And then finally, 2-time breaker. Its attack speed is getting nerfed from 15 to 12. Really small nerf. Some of the 5-cost changes, as you guys can probably guess, are going to be affecting this, and we'll go into that when we get there. Now moving into champions. Ezreal, right? Now that Cho'Gath has become a good reroll comp, but is only with Lissandra, Ezreal has kind of fallen off as just a time breaker enabler. And he needs to be cool. He's a really cool champion. He's got a bunch of drones around him. He's a really cool scaling champion. How many times I'm going to say cool, no one knows. But he can be a lot stronger. We've had this change in dev, and he was a terror. Obviously, the set's changed a lot since then, but this is going to make him quite strong, and he's going to look a lot cooler with a lot more drones. Talon, this spell shape naturally means he's going to be very, very good early game when fights are a lot slower, there's less targets. But that doesn't mean his 3-star needs to be mediocre the entire time. So pretty big, 10% buff here, which means that Build a Bud should be a little bit better. When you 3-star him randomly, Medallion should be a little bit better. I think it's hard for us to get a spell shape to actually succeed past stage 4, but this should help you at least get there and feel like it's not such a waste of resources. 2 costs. Zoe has been the perennial really good AP secondary carry, even on stage 4 and 5 in a lot of comps, right? She hits a lot of units, spreads a lot of damage, but is never that exciting when you actually 3-star her. She's pretty close for what it's worth. I think she's in the closest stage she's gotten. But if Zoe's going to be your primary carry, you're going to have a bad time. So we're buffing up her 3-star quite a bit again. This is a different number. This is the secondary spell damage. So this is kind of the pass-through damage. Whenever it redirects, it goes through a bunch of units. That's going up. The reason we're hitting that one is because when we did the primary damage, which is a misnomer kind of, primary damage is the one that happens right when she redirects all the time. So it hits 1 to 2 targets. It ended up hitting your backline a lot and killing your backline really, really fast. So since this one is the pass-through, it's less likely to kill your backline, but more likely to slowly whittle down the board, which is kind of what we want. Now moving on to 3 costs. Diana and Urgot. Diana is a very, very interesting spell shape that we didn't really land right. I think it's very good at 1 and 2 star, but as a solo carry at a 3 star, it kind of wants to be this drain tank that doesn't exist in roles anymore. So she needs to do more damage, but never did enough damage. And then a lot of arbiters didn't give her exactly what she wanted compared to LeBlanc. But that aside, she's weak at 3 star, a little inconsistent with our artifacts. We're buffing her up. I think this will put her a lot closer to the other 3 costs. Speaking of other 3 costs, Urgot, really good in the first 2 patches. Now he is kind of an afterthought, right? He's just on the mech board for his traits. He's not even meched in a lot of mech boards, and that's not really fun. This is his transformed passive damage, which is going to be when you transform him, his auto attacks are going to hit harder. So hopefully we can see those 3-star Urgot comps back. I think he's really fun to watch when he's 3-star. He does a lot of crazy things that normal champions don't do with how hard he hits. Hopefully that comp is back, and it's a really fun one. 4 costs, I think we're in a pretty good spot for regionals and tack round. AP is generally more flexible, which happens to be a factor of a lot of the trait webs and itemization. But I do think AD can compete. It is slightly weaker, but I think it's not an easy shift to make Xayah better with swords or Quirky better with bows. But something that we can help is that Master Yi feels just weak regardless, even with Kindred, even with a bunch of 5 costs. He's just slow and very, very inconsistent. Sometimes he just gets stuck hitting a tank the entire time. Sometimes he gets targeted and just instantly dies. And so this is kind of increasing his uptime, which means that, hey, he's going to be in a spell just more. And when he's in a spell, he actually does decent damage. He actually does survive some with the Omni Vamp and increased move speed. So should make him more consistent. But overall, pretty happy with where 4 costs ended up for set 17. 5 costs. Graves, this is technically a buff, but more of like a design experiment, I guess. His upgrades had costs for 2 reasons. The one more minor reason is it's a tuning lever. Right? If there's an upgrade that was too good or too bad, we could always change the cost of it and make it slightly better or worse. But the other reason was that it's kind of a good signal to players on what tech tree you're on, right? If you're going down one path and you just want to upgrade everything, the cost will increase and the power increases as well. So players can naturally just understand, hey, this is going to be strong without having to read and evaluate all the numbers. But that does also mean some weird scenarios where you just feel like you're getting taxed for no reason, or like, I think it's just annoying, right? I think we saw one person ever not be able to buy one of these because of the cost, but most of the time it's just annoying. So we're going to take them all to 1 and see what that does for Graves. The next one is Zed. Over the whole set, we fixed his bugs, nerfed him over time. And he's still good, but he's a lot more narrow than other 5 costs, which means that the opportunity cost of taking an augment and risking your game on it is not worth it anymore. And we want people to have fun with Zed, so we're going to be buffing him back. Again, HP on the 2-star Zed is very, very important, right? All he has is HP and AD. And the more HP he has, which means the more clones pop, and if he's higher HP, the clones will still have Edge and Night, blah, blah, blah. It goes into this big cycle. So this HP is a pretty big buff. Now into the spicy changes. The first one is Shen. Shen is going to be a time breaker now. No other changes, right? So this is a big buff to him, and a big buff to a lot of comps that can play him. So this does make him more of an aura, right? You can put 2 Timebreaker on basically every board, which is why we nerfed Timebreaker. But this also opens up new comps and itemization for him. Primarily Timebreaker, obviously, right? You can play 5 Timebreaker now. You probably should not. You should probably play 4 Timebreaker, but then he gets a bunch of free AS. So imagine we're buffing Shen by 40% AS. That's a pretty big buff. Even if it's not that, the transition for a lot of the Ezreal comps, a lot of the Melio comps now have a cap that adds in a new tank, a new bruiser, a new damage dealer. So a lot of things to experiment with here. I think we had Shen as a Timebreaker a long time ago, and I found that it worked pretty well for the trait web. Felt really fun for Riven and all those other units. So try it out. I think this will work pretty well. I still think there's a lot of problems with Shen's shape and his role in like a fight, but fitting him into comp should feel a lot better now. And then for the next one, the riskier one is Vex. Vex is going to be a Stargazer now, right? The skin has been updated. And so the first thing to get out of the way is one of Vex's best friends is Nunu, who is obviously a Stargazer. So we are going to have to nerf Vex a little bit. We don't want that Fast 9 comp to be like head and shoulders above everything else. This does show one of those design costs for adding traits to 5 costs, which is when you add traits, they become 1 more narrow, right? So I think Nunu and Vex are going to be bound like almost forever now. And 2, it does take some of their like power budget in, right? So Vex is going to be weaker unless you play Stargazer, which means she's more narrow. But on the flip side, she does a lot of cool things for the trade. So this is always going to be that design balance we're going to be talking about behind the scenes. So, well, what does it do for Stargazer? Well, it does a lot of interesting things that has kind of filled in some of the holes for Stargazer. One is you get another high cost AP item holder, right? A lot of times you would get a TF2 or you get a Lulu 2. And if you don't want to reroll, you kind of just have to pivot completely off of Stargazer because what does it do for you? What are you going to do with those items? Secondly, it gives you another Rageblade holder, which is not always the best things, right? When you have like 4 and 5 costs sharing the same items, you get a little bit confused. You usually just kind of have to pick one of them. But since one's AP, one's AD, this one can do a cool flex thing where like, hey, you kind of lean towards Zaya, maybe you hit a Vex early, shift items around. And it also means Stargazer can build a lot of items, which is always good. Secondly, it gives you another high cost Stargazer to put on your board. So 5 Stargazer feels like less of a tax, right? There's been a problem the entire set where Stargazer 5 has felt like completely not worth chasing, right? Obviously, we can make the stats really, really high, which then leads to the emblem being insane if you get it in the right setup. But now you have 2 4 costs and a 5 cost, which means all you need to do is add Lulu and another Stargazer, and you're in there, right? And so hopefully we see a lot more 5 Stargazers, see what the game would be like if 5 Stargazer was a real trait. So I'm excited for this one the most. All right, moving on to augments. These are just going to be the champion augments mostly, and then 1 nerf to Birthday Reunion. Nasus is getting his base attack speed buffed from 0.75 to 0.8. This is really, really big. This is going to make the augment very strong. This affects how good Nasus is with AS, which means Rageblade is really good. And when you put Rageblade on a stacking unit, if you remember the Garen champion augment from a few sets ago, it's very, very powerful. Birthday Reunion, just nerfing the gold. We did that rework on it to make it weaker. Turns out if you give people 3 gold, they level to 5 on 2-1, and then you kind of like ignore the nerf in a sense, and it becomes just a very, very strong tempo augment. This should slow down that tempo a little bit. You're not as rich when you go to 5 on 2-1. And then Heart of the Swarm, I think it's a balance augment that's not living up to expectations. We made it so it is powerful, right? You are stable on stage 2. You can hit all your 3 stars and have a good shot at making the Apex Primordian. But that took up so much of the power budget that the Apex Primordian wasn't that exciting when you hit him, which was a big letdown to a lot of players. So if we're speaking in a purely balanced sense, this is probably going to make the augment too consistent and too strong. But I think for the bigger part of the player base and a bigger part of TFT is that this needs to be fun when you hit it, and it can't be letting players down. So we're going to be buffing it up quite a bit to be a lot more stable when you actually hit it. So I think this augment will be a lot more enjoyable, and go chase it. Aatrox, this is stellar combo. Just buffing up his damage across the board. He's just slightly weak, falls off a little bit. And that 5 Nova Strike is also getting a buff. So when you do put in 5 Nova, you're going to get that cool boom, the whole board takes damage. And then finally, Terminal Velocity. This is Poppy. Got to cast a little bit more often. This one like does a lot of damage. Looks really cool. Probably my favorite visual champion augment of the set. Just a little bit slow and doesn't really scale into late game as much as we would want. So that's it for 17.7. As always, thanks for playing, and take it easy, guys.